And then here we are going to be talking about what we're going to see in 2024. And first on our list is drone photos.
Why do you think drone photos are going to be trending in 2024?
Because it's something that's very different than taking a photo with a camera. It's a perspective that you can't see. You can see the venue along with it. I've started even using it indoors. Don't tell anyone. But I think everyone appreciates it, right? Drone is one of the features that a lot of people book us for as well. And
for video though.
Well, for video, but I think if we include it in the package, I don't know if it's something that we could even charge extra for or just include it or whatever it is. It is cool. It gives us a different challenge as well, not only for our couples, but I think it challenges us to see things differently or pose them or just get different angles that we don't normally do, right?
Yeah, we've always used the drone for video. We've not used it for photos. I think the trend is going to be using it for photos. However, like you said, the quality is not great for photo printing, and usually those type of photos I think you'd want to print like big, you know.
That is true.
You want to like have a big photo of it, but it's just probably not going to look very good.
A lot of people book venues based on what it looks like and
but not
the trees
all
and foliage
look
and whatever.
Good
yeah,
with
I know.
Drones. Like,
no,
that's
it's
the
true.
thing. Like some of the venues that we've shot for video, it's all trees or something. You can't really tell what it is, right? Like it depends. I think it just depends on where it is. And I think there's just a lot of factors when it comes to using it. I think it's a really cool concept, but I think people need to realize that it's not just cool, we put the drone up and it just captures it all. You have to make sure there's nobody in the frame. It's a lot more work than people realize and just more planning when it comes to doing it. So it's not something that you could just sort of add into a workflow like willy-nilly. It's usually something we have to plan.
Yeah, especially because you kind of need somebody to operate it, and it's hard to do it and talk to the couple and guide them at the same time, make sure you're getting the right shot. Sometimes you're in public places when you're doing it, and sidewalks and people, if they go to like a nice church and they love seeing the whole picture of the church and not just them in front of the door.
I think we'll see more and more of it this year, but just know that it's not going to be amazing to print, depending on what kind of drone. One of the trends that I think is here to stay is going to be more of that vintage, retro style of imagery. Even styles of things like cakes or decorations. I see a lot of that style coming through already, and I think it's going to stay in 2024. I'm not sure if it will last into 2025, but all trends kind of get overdone. But I feel like this one started this past season, but I think it's going to be here probably even heavier for this year. And things like direct flash or blurry photos or disposable cameras or film style cameras. I think film will always have a place in wedding photography, but I just don't see that retro style of it. I think you're going to see classic portraiture and film staying, but the rest of it will probably go. That's just what I think for 2025. I think it'll be here for 2024, but I don't see it really sticking around for the next year.
The direct flash is an interesting one. I never really used direct flash before this year. I think it was the first time that I really started using it, and it does give
because we did off-camera flash, right? We always did off-camera flash,
exactly.
And like we've really mastered that, and it looks amazing. But you know,
the direct camera stuff, I personally don't really find it very appealing, to be honest. I don't think it's as good as a nice bouncing flash off the ceiling, but there are times where I've seen it used and the photos look great, and it's just...
Where do you think it looks great?
A time that I thought was pretty cool is nighttime shot of them popping champagne, where you have some foreground stuff or it really blows them up, but then behind them is really dark. I don't really like it that it casts crazy shadows on stuff and you see that double image behind them.
I think that's what's cool about it, though. I think that's
you like that part?
No, I think that's why people like it.
It almost looks like
it's the retro style.
Yeah, it almost looks like it is a disposable camera that flashed too much and then you become blown out white, and a lot of people love that because it was a thing back then, and then cameras got better, people stopped using it, and now it's just something that's different. So I think that's why it's making a resurgence into the popularity.
But do you think it'll stay?
I think so. I think there's always going to be room for it because it's going to be overused and fizzle out, but then some people are just going to see it in portfolios and go, that's what I really want, or do a few photos of it at least just to give variety in a gallery.
But do you think that in 20 years, when you go back to look at your photos, would you be happy if every single one or most of your gallery is direct flash.
No, but I don't think there's any photographer that does full direct flash all day, I guess. It's the same with film photography. I think it's cool because as a photographer, it gives you a new skill to learn, right? If you've never done it in the past, that it's just fun to learn and try, and your couples might really love those photos as well. But I think as a client, no, you don't want your whole gallery to be, but I think mixing it in with digital creates a really good mix of stuff. Apparently it's quite expensive.
What do you think about the posing or the grainy images or disposable cameras and stuff like that for guests? What do you think about those trends?
Like this disposable camera on a table and then people can do it, or a little table, maybe the guest book that
people can take it.
Yeah,
I don't see that going anywhere. I feel like that's still very popular.
Yeah, that's super cool.
I don't see it going anywhere.
It's still trending now.
How many weddings have we been to this year that had it? Like over half of them.
Probably, yeah, it's a really good idea.
Even if they have a photo booth, I feel like they still do that sometimes, you know?
Well, it's just nice to get a photo of the guests enjoying themselves. They can be creative too.
What do you think about blurry images and like lots of grain or just like random posing where it's very like retro style? I think that those are fun and those are cool to have, but I don't see it as your entire gallery is going to be these poses where you're just not really in love. I don't know. I just think when you're getting married, you want to have more romantic photos. To each their own, but that's just my thoughts.
I feel like it shouldn't be your whole wedding, but if you include a few during the day, I think it makes sense as a variety. I feel like a lot of our blurry photos is like once we got a few of nice digital crisp photos, then we mix in a couple blurry ones, especially on the dance floor when there's a lot of movement. I think those are really cool. Or having the wedding party circle them as they sit still.
Yeah, it was popular this year.
Yeah, and I think
posted like one photo and everyone's like, I want it.
And I think those are cool. I really like that there's both in one photo.
I like it when like the couple is walking. I just think that's just like a nice way to show just a little bit different. Not that like you said, I've gotten already like a nice photo of them walking, but it adds a little bit of I feel like an artsy, that's just what I use, like an artsy feel to it. Again, it's very few and far between. I'm not doing the whole gallery. I'm not doing detail photos or like table photos or any of that stuff. I'm doing very much photos of them moving. And I think that's really where I think it makes sense, or the bridal party moving. And then I also don't like to do the same thing at each wedding. So I feel like sometimes if I do it at one, I don't really want to do it at the next one. I just want to do something different, right? So
yeah, I like it maybe during a first dance or something. It's just, there has to be some kind of movement or else it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Does a blurry photo also count when you're doing light streaks, or is that a different thing?
That's like the slow shutter, like drag, where people are like literally shaking their cameras. I think that is pretty cool. I do a mix, so sometimes I do a few of those and then without it. But again, it's just about giving variety. That's really what I think last season taught us, is like that we need to just give a little bit more variety, and I found it was actually really fun for us to do that. It didn't make it seem like I was just doing the same thing. Like it was a challenge to try and do something new.
Yeah, that's how I found it too, was the few times I did photography, I challenged myself to just learn how to do it on a dance floor, for example, which is a great way because it's direct flash and slow shutter at the same time. It really helps when the dance floor is really dark. But if there's too many lights going on at the same time, then yeah, I learned that it doesn't look very good at that point to do slow shutter.
One of the next trends that I see really coming forward again this year is more of that like modern minimalistic look, like cement walls or just very textured feature. It's also nice because you can just use a blank space and just keep everything very minimal, and I think that that's a very popular thing coming up because also it's cheaper. Like if you just have like a very empty kind of space. I have seen it where it's like it's not cheaper. It's just, you can see that they put a lot of money in other things where it's just like lots of candles or very small floral arrangements or upgraded chairs or tables and stuff like that. I also see it in just like the photos that we take. So, you know, putting a couple up against like a very plain wall or a very minimalist feel. I see big space around them. I just see that as being very trendy for this year as well. I feel like that's kind of been hinting for the last couple of years, but I really see it coming together this year where it's very earthy, minimalistic, like modern. But then I also see the flip side, which is very luxurious, where you're going to have cool architecture. And I saw that coming through this year, where it was like old buildings or buildings that have brass or gold doorways or pillars and things like that. It's going to be like one or the other, where some couples are going to go with that very modern, minimalistic, very simple, very elegant. And then there's going to be the very structurally impressive, if that makes sense. When we think of weddings where we are, it's like the Chateau Laurier or places like that, where you just got lots of textural detail just from like the building itself or the rooms itself, because of everything that's going on the ceilings or the walls and things like that.
Yeah, and then in contrast, if you go outside of the Chateau Laurier and you use a lot of these buildings, some of them have just blank gray walls, like the art gallery, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really cool place because there are a mix of pillars, but you can also take a photo where the couple is very small and there's huge blank wall, like you said, concrete, and it creates really cool photos that way too.
I see like a lot of that coming through, for this year as well. Is that it's gonna be like one or the other. I don't really see the greenery, the like boring stuff anymore. I think it's gonna be candles and florals, or it's gonna be all out. I don't really see
greenery kind of just faded, right? Everyone wants flowers, and a lot of it was white flowers this year.
I see the greenery just like it's had its time. It's done. Let's just call it, the greenery is done, we're done. It's not necessarily cheaper. It's overdone. Just adding like a tiny little spread is just don't do it. I'd rather you put some beautiful cotton cheesecloth. Put some cheesecloth, some candles, and call it a day. Like let's finish with the greenery. Like we're done. Like we're done. You're done.
You're done.
You're done. That's what I see.
Greenery, you're done.
Yeah, we're done with that. Please, no more greenery. Even the simple things like simple bouquets, where I've seen it where it's all the same flower. We saw that a couple times this year, and I think that that's really cool. And you could do the same thing where it's like all the same flower on certain tables. I like that idea, and then skip out on the greenery. Bud vases, like something simple. I think that is going to be more in this year than the greenery on the table,
Yeah, and speaking of bouquets, something that I also saw this year that I hadn't really seen in previous years was cascading bouquets. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's something that's going to be continuing to trend, or if that's something some brides like it and some brides don't. Where did that come from?
It's been around for a long time. However, I do have a thing with cascading, because I think when florists, it just happened to us a couple times this year where the brides asked for cascading, but they made it look like it was a ball and then super heavy coming out the bottom. It didn't really make sense it was all greenery and a ball of flowers, and it looked awful. I would say if you're thinking about getting a bouquet and you're really interested in that look, I think you need to be very specific on what that's going to be like by giving your florist a photo. And personally, I don't like cascading bouquets because I think it's very awkward for brides to be able to hold them. They're just too big. They don't sit well. You can't even really repurpose them. They can't sit on a table or go in a vase or anything like that. So to me, I think that is very an old style. I don't see the cascade coming back, but I do hope that people are careful on the wording.
You're right, and they have to be careful, maybe have an example from the florist to go on, because like you said, it can be done poorly and then that really doesn't look great in photos. And my problem with it is that you can't really put it from one side to the other when you're taking photos. They always have to be held in a certain way, because one side looks great and then the other side may not look as great. And you can't switch hands, so you have to always have the bride on the same side every single photo. I like mixing it up for their portfolio, or just mixing it up because the light hits it in a certain way and you have to have them stand on a certain side, and it just doesn't really go well. It's not very practical. So cascading bouquets, hit and miss.
That's a no for me, dog. That's a no for me, dog. That's a no for me. Next up on the block is audio guest books. I think they're here to stay. However, I do think people need to be very aware of making sure that guests are aware that it's there and how to use it. I think there needs to be some kind of incentive. If you leave a message, you get a free shot at the bar or something.
That would be really good, actually.
I don't know. There just needs to be an incentive, because I think that people do spend a lot of money on like a guest book or a photo booth or even a signing book or whatever. And guests need to understand that people are spending money on these things and they need to use them. And the reason that I'm saying this is because we went to a wedding and I know that they had like almost 200 guests and only like 30 people left a message, and half of them were vendors. So in that case, it doesn't really make sense. It's obviously nice for them to have those 30 people, but how nice would it have been if everybody was able to leave a message, right?
So I think having an incentive it makes a big difference, especially if the audiobook itself, the telephone is in a separate room. You really got to have your MC say it between each speech, hey, you should go and do it. Or when the dance floor opens, whenever, just to direct people over there. If it's in the same room as the party.
Cocktail hour is good though too. I think that's where it needs to be done too.
That's true, yeah. But you really need somebody manning it in the sense of getting guests to really corral to it and leave something. You really have to be careful about where you put it as well, because if you're putting it near the dance floor and that's when people are talking into it, and can they clearly hear the message? Yeah. If it's in a different room, how do they even know it's there?
I think that would be cool too, is that the bride and groom should also leave a message to each other. It doesn't have to be bride and groom, it could be bride and bride or groom and groom, but they should both leave each other a message. I think that would be really cool too.
Yeah, at different parts of the day, you know?
Well, maybe.
Yeah, like maybe after the ceremony, do a little something.
There's not always that much time, so
true,
let's be honest here. But at the end of the night, before they leave, I think they should both just leave each other a message. I think that would be cute.
That would make it worthwhile, at least to save that message, right?
Especially when they're wasted.
That's when I leave my messages.
When you're wasted?
Yeah. Or after I've had a good steak.
The steak. For 2024, I think that we're going to see a lot more people reading their vows privately. I think for a video perspective, it's just good that they do vows regardless, but I want them to do it in front of their family. I don't know why. I just think for me, what it does is it allows the couples to reminisce about what they feel about their partner. Whenever I'm at a wedding, I always look over and I can see couples looking at each other when they're saying their vows, or the parents are emotional. So to me, I feel like vows, as much as it's a personal thing, it's so much better if you can do them or something of them in front of your family. That's just my opinion. What do you think? Do you think it's worthwhile? Like, what do you see when you do it?
Well, the important thing is that they say some kind of vows. That's not just a repeated thing in front of the aisle.
Yeah, like I do.
Yeah, the I do's or the ring exchange, something that's a little bit more personal that you guys can do for each other. But at the same time, you're right, saying it in front of people gets a lot of reactions, which is, as a professional photographer, videographer, it's good content, right? To put in your video, have people tearing up.
We've had people sobbing. Like, I swear, we've had people sobbing, especially this year. At one point, I think when I was delivering a gallery, I didn't have a picture of somebody not crying, like at one ceremony. People were just so emotional and so invested in hearing it. So to me, I think that that's so important, is for people to do them. But the thing is, I see it both sides, right? I can see where, they're just embarrassed or they're just nervous. They don't want to talk in front of people. So I get that side too. So the private vows, I think, will be probably more popular, but if you can find it in yourself to do it in front of people, it really does make for some.
And it depends if you have like a church ceremony. Sometimes
you can't. Right?
You can't do personal vows. Or I've seen the opposite, where the personal vows, when they did right after first look, they got really emotional, and when they said it in front of people, they weren't. And that private moment really gives them the time to get all the jitters out or cry or whatever. Like you said, they might be embarrassed to be emotional in front of their family and friends. But there's always an opening if you don't want to say the whole thing. Yeah. At least say a few things that you love about the person in front of everyone. Yeah. A lot of the times I catch myself looking at you. If they say something that's like relatable to us, right? That's us, and I think that's what makes people come to hear that.
If you're with your boyfriend, or you're with your fiance, or you're with somebody you've been married to for a long time, being at a wedding brings you back to like that. You know what I mean?
There's that nostalgic thing.
Remember when we were like that?
I remember when I first got into photography, and I would hear people's vows, and then I would hear the speeches, and I felt like I knew the person so much, right? And they obviously didn't know anything about me, especially when you first started and I was second shooting for you and I wasn't super invested. I hadn't lured the couple that didn't do engagement shoots. So at least you knew them in some capacity, but I would just show up on the day of.
I don't know them like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, true. You really get to know a person once you hear vows and speeches and all that. And I would come up to them at the end of the night and be like, we're so much alike. We like so many of the same things.
We like video games and we like this.
Oh my God, you grew up with Pokemon cards too, or whatever it is. And they would look at me all weirded out. But those are the kind of things that can really make people get to know you as a person and as a couple.
Hiring a quality vendor, do you think that that is worthwhile in 2024 or not?
I mean, I think it's always worthwhile. Why would I say not hire a quality vendor? It's important to know how much money you have to spend. It's all based on budget availability. Finding that vendor that's on a preferred list or that referrals is a huge thing because if anyone's like us, we really just refer the people that we worked with and are professional and do a good job and really mesh with our style. So,
but there's things like, for instance, a lot of people are always like, oh, video, it'd be nice to have, but, you know, just not in the budget. Would it be worthwhile to just hire a nobody videographer? Would you hire somebody who's new if you're just like, hopefully I get something good?
I think looking at their work is obviously the first clue into what you're gonna get out of it, right?
Yeah.
And something is better than nothing. I always think if you don't want to spend too much money, but you still want video, I'm just an advocate for everyone should have video at their wedding. We always talk about why would you spend so much money on a wedding if you don't have any video of it, right? And it's the same with photo. Obviously, I've never gone to a wedding that was video only, but maybe that's trending. Maybe videographers will get picked before photographers.
It happens.
Yeah, that's another trend that maybe we would have seen. I mean, we got hired as a photographer when couples had already hired a videographer, and I like that. I like where this is going because I think people are realizing that a video is more important. Well, at least something that's easily shareable online. It has the audio aspect to it, which I think is super important, especially for the speeches and ceremony and the vows. Everyone still puts a lot of emphasis on photo, but that's old school thinking, right? We're moving into a generation where it's all video based. So hire a videographer.
First.
Yeah, first. Video first, photo second.
True.
So you can cheap out on a photographer, but hire a good videographer.
Oh.
I think everyone should have the video in some capacity. If it's all you can afford, it's all you can afford, but at least make sure they have good audio. The audio is the huge part of what makes video so special, right? And if it's just like a shotgun mic in the back of the room, then you're not really going to get a lot of good audio and your video is not going to be any good, really.
These are the trends that we see happening in 2024. Let us know if you agree with these trends or if you think that they're going to be different or if you have opinions on them, because we would love to hear from you. So feel free to get in touch with us through Instagram, TikTok, and let us know what you think.